All right, so 6.1, we're looking at a little intro to metabolism, and a cell is just, I don't know, like when you think of a cell, I'm not sure what you think of. Maybe you just think of this like circular picture that's like a sphere. But like what I want you to begin to think about when you think of a cell is think of just like this soap bubble that contains a bunch of chemical reactions. A cell is just a ton of organized chemical reactions. So that's really what you are, is a big old beautiful lump of cells that do chemical reactions. Cells, like we have to get energy to power many of these chemical reactions. I'll explain what kind of reactions need energy to happen, which kinds don't, but we get that energy from ATP. We get ATP by putting sugars into the mitochondria and doing cellular respiration. That'll be chapter 7, where we'll go into the details of that. Anyways, looking at some examples. So organisms can do chemical reactions that like release light. Meaning that there's a lot of different kinds of chemical reactions that happen in an organism. So you have cool ones like this, or like ones in a firefly. But like what is making this glowing happening is just chemical reactions. In this case, chemical reactions that release light. Okay? All right. Now, I think we all sort of have an understanding of what metabolism is. But like if I were to ask each of you to like write down the formal definition of metabolism, I would imagine a lot of you would have a hard time really describing what it is. When we talk about metabolism, it is the totality, all of the chemical reactions that an organism does. Okay, that's what metabolism is. The sum total, you'll hear it described, of all the organism's chemical reactions. Oh, another thing, if you're struggling in the class and you haven't been reading your book, please read your book. Like I promise you, it helps. Like I've like failed biology classes, and then I've had classes where I just like read the book before class, and then put in some time studying outside of class, and all of a sudden I was like him. I was like, I was him. Okay, thank you. Like I really being serious. Like it really makes a huge difference if you just like read before class, or you put in, you gotta figure out what works for you. Anyways, all right. Metabolism, we call it an emergent property. I don't know. This is just really just saying that there isn't like any one chemical reaction that is metabolism. It's all of the chemical reactions together. Okay? All right. When we're talking about metabolism, a huge concept here is it's a pathway of chemical reactions. Think of it like a domino effect. One chemical reaction will lead to another chemical reaction. Meaning we might have some sort of starting molecule, we'll call it A. A will undergo a chemical reaction and become B. B does another chemical reaction that becomes C, then C becomes D, and then you'll have your ending product. So you'll see this when I show you cellular respiration and photosynthesis. If it's cellular respiration, this A would be glucose, and this ending product would be like ATP, water, and carbon dioxide. Now, most of these chemical reactions can technically happen by themselves, but they happen so slowly that life can't function like at all. So we have these enzymes. Enzymes speed up, you're good. Enzymes speed up chemical reactions. Okay? So enzyme 1 would speed up the chemical reaction from A to B, and these enzymes get reused. Because enzymes are made of proteins, and proteins are expensive to make. So we want to reuse these enzymes. Think of an enzyme as Match.com. Okay? How an enzyme works is it takes your two reactants and it brings them together so they can collide and they make a product. That's all it's in. I'll show you more of those details when we get into like the structure of an enzyme, but that's how an enzyme speeds up the chemical reaction. It just allows the two reactants to just run into each other. Okay. Another thing with these pathways, what this means is cells have a way to like speed up and slow down these pathways. So if I want to speed up like cellular respiration, I could increase maybe the amount of enzymes. If you want to slow something or shut something down, like you inhibit one of those enzymes. That's how like some pesticides can work. Like how they can kill certain insects is like insects will have certain like enzymes that are unique to them and not to us. So you'll design a pesticide that shuts down one of the enzymes in a critical metabolic pathway in that insect, and then that insect can't survive for very long because they stop making that product they need. Okay. All right, so getting into kind of different kinds of chemical reactions. Generally speaking, chemical reactions are either you're either breaking something down or you're building something. And we kind of talked about that in Unit 1, right? Where monomers to polymers, you're building something. Polymers to monomers, you're breaking it down. If you're going polymers to monomers, like you're breaking like down a complex molecule, a polymer, back into its monomers, that is called a catabolic reaction. Sometimes you'll hear it called catabolism. Think of a cat. You know why cats are the worst? They break things all the time.
Do they really?
I don't know. I'm just making that up. They probably not any more than like my dog does. It just works with the memorization. So, anyways, now that I've alienated like half the room, whenever we do catabolism, the purpose of breaking down these molecules is you're trying to make energy. Because what's going to happen is you'll use the energy of catabolism, of breaking down things to get energy, to then fuel building things, to fuel what's called an anabolic reaction. So for example, in cellular respiration, we take glucose and we put it in a catabolic pathway where we break down glucose into the individual components. Okay? And then you'll use that ATP to do an anabolic pathway. So anabolic, when you hear anabolic, I'm curious, what does it remind you of? What do you think of? Anabolic steroids, that's exactly what you think of. So anabolic steroids, that's what like, well, you shouldn't take them, but like that's what people could like illegally take. I think it's illegal. I know it's illegal in sports. Is it generally illegal to take steroids? I think it is. It's not. It's bad for you, but like.
You take like gear, and that's.
Yeah. All right. Doesn't matter. Anyways, anabolic steroids. It's a steroid. It's a hormone that allows you to do a lot of anabolic chemical reactions, namely building muscles. Right. So anabolic. Think anabolic steroids. So you're building something. Now, where did the energy come from to build these muscles? It came from a catabolic reaction. So these go together. They exist as a pair. It's kind of like the co-transporter we talked about, where like you could take one thing going down its concentration gradient and use that energy to power something going against its concentration gradient. It's sort of a similar idea. So an example of an anabolic pathway would be taking amino acids and using them to make proteins. Biosynthetic, biology, synthetic, like you're making something. Synthesis, making something. Okay. So yeah, as I keep mentioning, energy. It's you can't run metabolism without energy. You have to have energy. So then, if you're somebody like you're a scientist that studies energy, you're studying bioenergetics. So that's the study of how does energy flow through a living organism. So bio, life, energetics, study of energy. Okay. Now getting into some physics talk. Like you're like kind of like asking what is the definition of metabolism? If I ask what is the definition of energy, I think a lot of people will be like I don't know. You're like it's like this. Energy is the capacity to cause change, or as Mr. Dobson would say, the ability to do what? Stuff. Work. Do work, right? Anybody know what the definition of work is, like the formula for work is in physics?
Wait.
Come on, physicists. Dobson's sweating right now. He's
forgot it.
kind of forgot it. Do you have to memorize equations? And
No.
like, you don't have to? Oh my goodness. If you do the MCAT, you have to memorize them.
Oh no.
Yeah. Sorry to like, yeah. So, meanwhile, everyone like decides to not be a doctor. Like, yeah, when you do like the MCAT, it's like the SAT to get into med school. That's what makes it so hard. Like physics can be kind of easy if you're given all the formulas. You just got to use them. But like, yeah, you actually have to memorize the formulas. So work is force times distance.
Oh.
F times D. Now, see how this relates to this. So the capacity to cause change. So why that would be work is like you have a force, like I am doing this, and I'm doing it across a distance. So the more work I do, the more I'm able to put a force and move an object across some sort of distance. That would be your change. Yeah, that is, yeah.
It's actually displacement. So that's
Displacement, my bad.
I got beat with
Displacement, that's like absolute value stuff.
so smart.
Anyways, so yeah, you can use work to like oppose different forces. Not as important, but just energy, just think of it as the ability to cause change or ability to do work. Okay. Now getting into different kinds of energy. There is kinetic energy, the energy of motion. So if you have a lot of kinetic energy, you're moving around more. If you're not moving as much, you have low kinetic energy. Thermal energy would be a type of kinetic energy. To be an example of kinetic energy. So when we're talking about metabolism, we're curious really about thermal energy. We're very curious about what is the movement, how fast are our atoms or molecules moving. If they have a lot of thermal energy, they're moving like a lot. If they have low thermal energy, they're not moving very fast. That should make some intuitive sense, right? Now, this has always been kind of a stumper. Like, what is the difference between heat and thermal energy? I mean, I'm not going to, like, make a huge deal about it on the test, but, like, the technical difference is, like, whenever, like, if you have, okay, you have these molecules, and these molecules have a lot of energy, and they're going to transfer that energy to, like, maybe this is like a gas, to some other molecules that are moving maybe slower. The process of transferring that thermal energy from one set of molecules to another, that is heat. That is when you would say heat is being transferred. Anyways, light could be a type of energy that we could harness to do work, to make things change in organisms. So like photosynthesis, classic example, right? We're harnessing the energy of light to have the ability to do work. Okay. All right. So then I guess you could say opposite, or like what kinetic energy and potential energy, they go as pairs. So then potential energy would be what energy does something have by just like its location or the structure of that thing. So in physics, you focus a lot more on location, like, oh, this has a lot of potential energy because gravity can pull it down. In chemistry, we talk more about structure, about chemical energy, where whenever you have a molecule like water, like H2O, there is a lot of chemical energy that is stored in those bonds. Think of bonds, like why a bond has stored up chemical energy. Think of it like a spring. Like these are all these very like condensed springs, and when you break that bond, that energy gets released. Okay? Yeah, and then energy, it can't be created or what? Destroyed. You just transfer it from one form to another. Okay? All right. Hopefully this is something of a review for you. So you're just kind of showing you like the cycle of potential and kinetic energy. So, if you're like you're a diver up here. Jocelyn, how's this form here for diving? Is this solid form? Anyways, if you're up here on the platform, we would say you have a lot of potential energy, right? Because the higher up you go, the more gravity can pull you back down towards the center of the earth. So then potential energy gets converted to kinetic energy. And then, boom, when the diver hits the water, some of that energy, this is key, anytime you transfer energy from one form to another, what happens? Heat. Right? That's why you can't just have like an infinite perpetual motion machine. Whenever this diver hits the water, some of that kinetic energy is going to be lost to the movement of the water molecules. A small part of it would actually be lost as heat that can heat up the surroundings. But then, we could kind of begin to recycle some of that as back into potential energy by climbing up these ladders. Okay. All right, so thermodynamics, when you study thermodynamics, you're studying energy transformations. Okay? You're studying how do we transform energy from one thing to another. So in biology, it's kind of getting back into the catabolic, anabolic pathways. How do we relate like a catabolic pathway where you're breaking something down? How does that energy get transferred into an anabolic pathway where we build something up? Okay? Now within thermodynamics, there's this kind of tricky idea called an open system and an isolated system. So an open system would be we're open system. This is really what we study in biology. If you're maybe an engineer, you could get more into like isolated systems and stuff. But we're an open system because we can exchange energy with the environment, right? Like if you're sweating, you can release heat to the environment. If you're a plant, you can then take in the light from the outer environment. Whereas an isolated system, that would be something that can exchange things with the environment. So that would be the idea of like a thermos. Or like this water bottle that tries to like, this wants to be an isolated system. We don't want the heat from the outer surroundings influencing what's happening on the inside. So again, we focus more on open systems in biology. Okay. Now, there are two laws of thermodynamics that, you probably learned at least since like 8th grade. You know, the first law of thermodynamics is energy can't be created or destroyed. It just gets transferred from one form to another. All right, so I said that earlier. You can't create energy or destroy it. You just transfer it from one form to another. Maybe from like kinetic to potential energy. Or you turn it, or a plant is going to take it from light energy into chemical energy of glucose. You're transforming it from one form to another. And because you can't create or destroy energy, that's why it's also called the principle of conservation of energy. So you'll kind of hear people say those interchangeably. So rather than saying the first law of thermodynamics, they'll say the conservation of energy. Okay? There you go. I always have a hard, like, how do you remember the difference between first and second law? Because, like, that is kind of a classic test question, like, which of the following, like, is, like, a correct rephrasing of the first law of thermodynamics? You would have to know that's the first law of thermodynamics. I don't know. Think of a 1-year-old. 1-year-olds just destroy everything, like cats. Okay. Anyways, so an example of the first law of thermodynamics, like a bear. This bear is getting the chemical energy from food, and it's going to break that down and then try to put into the chemical energy, the chemical potential energy of let me say it this way. There is chemical energy, potential energy stored in all the bonds that hold up this fish. This bear wants to utilize the energy stored in the bonds that hold up that fish and use it to do bear stuff. You know?
You just asked me if Winnie the Pooh's a bear.
Winnie the Pooh is a
I
bear.
thought he was. I was just...
Man, we were doing, like, the whole science department, we did a food web, and, like, they were, like, throwing shade. They're like, Winnie the Pooh in a I'm like, it's a bear or a forest ecosystem.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
What does Winnie the Pooh walk on?
I don't know. Walks on grass?
His bare feet.
His bare feet. I was going to say, I feel like there's a punchline.
No way. That was fired. That was fired.
All right, so that was the first law of thermodynamics. So then the second law is entropy, where entropy is a measure of disorder. So here's the idea. The universe wants to go towards an increase in entropy. The universe wants to go from order to less order. And you all know this because you all have a room, right? And you know that your room, you don't wake up like this, right? Like, to make your room look organized, you have to put in energy to clean your room. By like just the natural laws of the universe, your room gets messy. Things get messy. Things go from more order to less order. Think of when something dies. They were ordered, but then eventually they go to less order. They start to break down because they're no longer getting the energy from food to keep their bodies together. So appreciate just that idea that, like, to keep us together, we have to put in energy. We're going against the natural order of things. That's what the second law of thermodynamics is saying. every time there's an energy transfer, so when the bear broke down the fish and used that energy to run around and stuff, that whole thing was increasing the entropy of the universe. So this is trying to say, like, when you measure entropy, so if I were to draw these molecules here, and then it looks like this, which side would have more entropy? The right side, right? So there is more disorder, there's more space between these molecules than here. This is more ordered, less ordered. Okay. All right. Yeah, so you're like, okay, well, why does every chemical reaction increase entropy? Like, what does that mean on like a reaction to reaction basis? Well, think of your body heat. The reason why you're able to stay warm and have like a temperature of like 96 or whatever like outside it might be like 40s or 50s, is because I said you're this like beautiful sack of chemical reactions. Each chemical reaction releases heat, right? And that heat, your body will try and contain that heat to raise your body temperature. But every time you do a chemical reaction, some amount of heat is lost to the surroundings. When I showed you the diver example, when that diver hit the water, some amount of that energy, that kinetic energy, was lost to heat in the surroundings, or that was used to then move like the water in the lake. Okay. In a food web, not a food web, but like an energy pyramid. Remember this? I love teaching the energy pyramid because it was like every 7th grader was like, kill the energy pyramid. You know, it's like everyone was like, yeah, I'm so good at energy pyramids. Anyways, you have what's on the bottom? Producers. Okay. That'd be thanks. That took a little too long there. And then you have your consumers, your first, second, and third. And notice how theoretically it should be bigger on the bottom, and then there's less and less area of each level. Why? Why does it get smaller as you go towards the top? Yeah, Thomas?
You only get 10% of the energy that you consume.
Yeah, good. As you go from one level to the next, 10% gets lost as heat. Okay? Cool. All right. So this is just kind of going back to the bear. So I showed you the bear and what that would look like for the first law of thermodynamics. What that would look like for the second law of thermodynamics, that bear took the chemical energy stored in that fish. Yeah, what's up?
So going back to the entropy, is the reason why there's more disorder is because we lose heat?
Say that again one more time.
Is the reason why we get more disorder as we do more energy transfer because we lose heat?
Yeah, so whenever you do a chemical reaction, that heat gets released, and then that heat will then move molecules further apart. Yeah. All right, going back to this fish and this bear. So there's chemical energy stored in this fish. The bear uses it and turns that chemical energy into kinetic energy. It's running around, but all of the chemical reactions the bear is doing to do kinetic energy, to move around, each time it does one of those chemical reactions, it loses some amount of energy as heat. And glucose is like what is like the foundational food source to fuel all that. Glucose is more ordered than all of the CO2 and H2O that gets released. So like in cellular respiration, you have one single glucose molecule, and that one single glucose molecule goes into 6 CO2, 6 individual, smaller, so more entropy, carbon dioxide, and then 6 H2O. So when you went from one molecule and you made more molecules, that is an increase in entropy. This is your room. All the socks are in the drawer. This is after a week. Everything is just on the floor. Or you're like clothes hamper or something. All right. Spontaneous and non-spontaneous. So if you describe somebody as spontaneous, what would they be like? Steve is so spontaneous.
Quick to make decisions.
What's that?
Quick to make decisions.
Quick to make decisions. Maybe a little like just does things. Like it just kind of happens. In chemistry, when we say something is spontaneous, we're saying it's a chemical reaction that happens without an input of energy. I don't have to put in energy to make that happen. It just naturally will happen. And when I say naturally happen, it can be quickly or slowly. And so when it happens spontaneously, a spontaneous reaction will increase the entropy of the universe. So going back to like these molecules here, if they are more ordered, they naturally want to become less ordered. Things naturally want to go from less entropy to more entropy. This would be a spontaneous reaction. Your room getting disorganized is a spontaneous reaction. You don't really have to put in energy to make your room disorganized, unless you're just like intentionally running around breaking stuff. But like that just naturally happens. Or flip it the other way, non-spontaneous would be going the other way. This would be non-spontaneous. I would have to put in energy to make things become ordered again, to clean up your room. Okay. So the reactions that like keep our body all together, those are all non-spontaneous reactions that require the energy of ATP. But then we will use spontaneous reactions that we can do during cellular respiration to break down and get ATP to then use to build things up. Okay. We've kind of danced around some of this stuff. This is just saying that what I said earlier, like as organisms, we are organized, we are structured, and that doesn't just naturally happen. Like we had to put in energy to maintain that order. And then like whenever you break things down, like you take glucose, where I showed you the glucose to carbon dioxide and water, that is going from more ordered to less ordered. And then I showed you this with like the energy pyramid, where energy is going to flow into the ecosystem as light. So in that diagram, that pyramid, I could have added the sun, adding energy to the producers. But then, as Thomas said, energy leaves the pyramid in the form of heat. Anybody ever been here? La Sagrada Familia? Probably didn't say that very well. It's a beautiful, it's massive.
The intro to Disney.
Intro to Disney. Anyways, I don't know. I don't really know why the picture's here. I'm just like, it's just really cool. It's just saying like living things can be really organized and really ordered, but that's not natural. Just like that church just didn't just like get built, right? A lot of energy and work was put into building this. All right, so you might be thinking like, wait a minute. You're saying that the universe naturally wants disorder, but we're ordered. So, like, wouldn't that not make sense? Like, how is it possible that we can be organized and ordered, yet all chemical reactions are increasing the disorder of the universe? That's because whenever we become ordered, like if I eat something and I get the energy, that bear eating the fish, it gets the energy from that fish. It is becoming more ordered, but it's releasing more heat. The bear becomes more ordered, but the universe overall becomes more disordered. More disorder is being put into the universe from the bear eating the fish than the bear gets from being ordered. Hope that makes sense.
Say it again.
So when the bear eats the fish, the bear uses the energy of the fish to become ordered. But then the bear releases a ton of heat from doing the chemical reactions to break down that fish. So all of that heat being released is why we're not violating the second law of thermodynamics. We're still increasing the entropy of the universe by all the heat that's being produced from the chemical reactions of digestion, of breaking down that fish. Hope that makes sense. In other words, we are islands of low entropy, so more order, in a universe that is increasingly becoming random. What they mean by random is, like, this is not random, they are ordered, this should be random. So the universe is naturally becoming more like this, more and more random. This is us, this is not normal. To maintain this, you need energy. Okay? I think that's the last slide. Okay, let me pause this.